Hello and welcome to the very first episode of Without Filters. Wait, how do we call Without Filters in Albania?
Pa filtra.
Oh yeah, we're beyond excited to kick things off with a very special guest. But firstly, let's introduce ourselves. I'm Dinuka.
And I'm Alkida Gazidede, and here we are at Said Najdeni High School in Dibër. This podcast explores stories that don't always make the headlines but are crucial to understanding the world around us.
Exactly. Now, for our very first episode, we have someone who not only had an incredible professional journey, but is also a very inspiring person. She worked in many challenging environments, like for example, the Western Balkans. She's been a former senior advisor at the FSDO, and most importantly, she is the deputy of British Embassy here in Albania. You know, she's seen and she's done it all.
Exactly. It's a pleasure to have you today in our school near Marzouk. So, welcome once again. You have been the Deputy Ambassador of the United Kingdom to Albania for 3 years now. Can you tell us a little about your experience in Albania? How did you feel on the first time? Because I think that Tirana was the first place, your first destination in Albania, right? Isn't it?
Okay, well, great question, and it's a real pleasure to be here with you. Thank you so much. And the first episode, so we are pioneers. I would query your introduction. You said challenging environment, such as, this isn't challenging, this is amazing. We are having such a great time in Albania, and I was in Bosnia-Herzegovina before. These are extraordinary countries. I first came to Albania, it must have been around 2008-09 as a tourist. There was some interesting attitudes towards service in restaurants, but already that kind of friendliness was coming out. And then I learnt Albanian language as best I could, though I make lots of mistakes, which has allowed me to access people and parts of the country that perhaps you wouldn't if you couldn't talk to the people around you. So I've been having a really brilliant time. I have to say, I think this is the most scary thing I've done since arriving in Albania.
No.
So treat me gently.
Yeah.
Okay, we're so happy.
Now, I have a really serious question. A career in diplomacy isn't something easy, you know, it's something you just stumble into. It requires, first of all, a clear purpose, then it requires nights without sleep, days of hard working. Now, my question to you is, what initially inspired you to take this path, to go to this path? Was there any particular moment or experience that solidified this decision?
My first degree at university was in international relations, and then I studied European studies. But I missed the deadline to apply for the Foreign Office, so I never bothered. And I did various other jobs, mostly working on the Western Balkans. I lived in Pristina for a few years. And then I had triplets, triplet children, Prinjake, which was the most challenging part of my life ever. And that's where the sleepless nights came. And I did little bits and pieces of work, but then essentially I thought I need a steady job. And I would really like to be doing something I'm good at. And the thing I am good at is engaging with this part of the world, I think. Yeah. I'm not a brilliant diplomat, but I'm a Western Balkans nationalist, if you like. I feel really, really passionately about this part of the world. So that's what really inspired me. Essentially, you inspired me.
Thank you. Now, along the way, of course, you had to face many challenges. But which one would you consider the biggest, like the hardest to overcome? Maybe breaking into the field, or like balancing your professional and your personal life? Which one was it?
Any moments or any situations?
I tell you what, it was really, really hard a few years ago when we had what we call in the UK the small boats crisis, because so many young Albanians, mostly men, were using this horribly risky journey to cross to the UK. I didn't want to do sort of policy in this, but for me personally, rather than professionally, it was a stressful time. The relations between our two countries were stressed by this kind of crisis, but I was still a mother of 3. I still had to kind of cope with my day life, my night life, and so that was the most difficult in terms of balance, I think. But in bigger challenging terms, it wasn't frightening because I knew that I had a really good organisation to support me, really good friends and brilliant people. So there wasn't a moment at which I thought, I can't cope. And I think those are the times in your lives where it can get really, really scary, particularly for young people, before you have the sort of skills and experience that tells you it's not the end of the world if this goes wrong. And you know, that's one of my biggest lessons.
That's what you should tell yourself.
Things can go wrong and you're probably going to be okay.
Beautiful. How do you see the role of young people in shaping the future of their communities?
The role of which people? Young people?
Yeah, young people.
How do I see the role of young people? I mean, it's a cliche, young people are the future. But I think there is a choice about whether young people have a role or not, and that choice is that of the young people, and you may need to fight for it. You can just follow in the footsteps of everybody who's come before you, in which case you play no role in shaping communities, you simply participate. But if you want, as a generation, you can decide what the values are of that community. For example, you might be really interested in opportunities for people less able. You might want to care for older people. You might think that rural beauty and protection of the environment are really important because you'll have to live in that when you're 80 years old. And those are choices you can make as a group, and I think it is then easier if you are a group. I think if an individual is making those choices, they're much less likely to succeed. So getting together as a group to shape a community along your own chosen values, I think would be a very important role, but it's an optional role.
Yeah, yeah.
We think so.
Yeah, now you spent a lot of time in Albania, and during this time you had to learn about, you know, the patriarchal mentality of Albanians. What issue would stand out to you in terms of gender inequality, and what tangible steps do you propose we could take to create more opportunities for women and girls?
Well, I'd almost quite like to turn the question back to you as a potential patriarch. Yeah. What do you think?
No, I'm not a patriarch.
A potential patriarch.
I think that women, of course, had to have more options, more opportunities, at least equal with men, but I don't know, I don't have the patriarchal mentality, I cannot speak.
Why not then? Why don't you have the patriarchal mentality?
Because my family has raised me to not have this kind of mentality.
Yeah.
Yes.
And I mean, do you want to add anything on that?
No, I want to say that it's very important to raise in that way.
Yeah.
And not just with this mentality that we created a few years ago.
And this is a really bad side of Albanians. They think like all men are patriarchals. They all protect their interest before the women's, but this is not true. Yes, it's just a very big stereotype of Albanians.
So why I wanted to ask you the question instead of you asking me is because essentially, who am I to tell you what your country's social problems are? That's your diagnosis and your prescription. I can inspire, I can encourage. I do think that one thing I would say to girls all over the world is never ever write yourself out of something. Always think that you probably can do it if you try. Maybe it doesn't work out. So don't self-censor. But I think your society needs to diagnose and address issues yourself.
Yeah, we just want to know your perspective as coming from the UK. How did you see Albanian, and what solutions do you propose for these problems?
You've got very different gender identities in Albania. Some of them are historically really interesting, about the role of the matriarch in a household without a man, for example. You have got things that you have generated yourselves. There's obviously a difference between people who live in towns and people who live in rural areas, but that isn't universal. And there are some really powerful people who live in villages who are also women, but they would perhaps define themselves first as villagers rather than by gender. I don't have a solution. I think it needs to be a whole of society issue. There are some things you can do with legislation. There are some things voters can do, like voting for women, for example. There are things that men can do, as you've described with your family. And you can use experts, like we do a lot of work with UN Women on women's empowerment, use that expertise, but ultimately it's your decision of how you want your society to work and whether you want 50% of it to be empowered or not. And it feels to me like you're getting there with these kinds of ideas.
So you propose that the whole society should gather up and just reduce this problem day by day?
I'm afraid it's not that simple, but there are people like you in your own communities who can lead by example, who can encourage others and can lend a hand up. I have a very amazing woman mentor in my office. She's more senior to me, and she said, if I can, I will always give a hand up to another woman to follow in my footsteps. There is that sort of generosity that needs to exude outwards from those who've already got it. So perhaps there's something about how people in towns can help how people in villages. Perhaps there's something about how your kind of family, your parents' generation, can spread the word a bit. You've got an advocacy role. There's lots and lots of things to do around that. But my top piece of advice is to girls, assume you can do it and have a go.
Yeah. The universal advice, I would say.
Oh, yeah. What advice do you have for young people in Dibër, especially for young girls who want to pursue a career in diplomacy, international relations? Because, for example, in my class we have so many boys and girls too who have a dream in to pursue a career in diplomacy or
Really?
international relations. So, what advice do you give us?
Oh, well, that's a great one, because I didn't follow the standard path at all. You know, I started doing diplomacy mid-career rather than at the bottom, because I missed this deadline. Learn languages. Your brain works much better when you're younger than when you're my age. So learn English, learn other languages, German, French.
School German too.
Absolutely, really good idea, because then you become a kind of fully rounded offer. Don't worry about following a traditional pathway. A degree in international relations is not necessary to join diplomacy, although perhaps in the Albanian system it might help. Don't do anything illegal. I mean, it sounds flippant, but we have a really difficult vetting process, and they will find out, in my system anyway, if you've done something illegal, and that would bar you from service. And be imaginative. You don't just need to do diplomacy inside a foreign ministry. You can do it in the United Nations, you can do it in international organisations, you can do it in regional organisations. There's the Regional Youth Cooperation Office, RICO, which is for the Western Balkans, but based in Tirana. Now, what they do is a form of diplomacy with young people. So get in touch with RICO, for example. They happen to be in your country. And, you know, look at the news, watch the news, have opinions, but don't express your opinions in a way that drowns out others. You need, as a diplomat, always to listen to what someone else is saying. Are they nervous? Do they really mean it? Are they following instructions? Or is this a genuine sense from that person? And how can you empathise with their predicament? So if you've got languages, you've got innovation, you've got a clean criminal record, and you can listen and empathise, you're making a really good start.
And most importantly, let your brain speak before your mouth.
I'm not very good at that.
Yeah. Now think about places like the UK or the Balkans. What do you think are going to be the same struggles these places are going to face like the next couple of decades?
Oh, I mean, it's definitely the climate change issue, isn't it? That's the thing that bothers me most about Albania, is the lack of care for the environment, at a kind of administrative level, the lack of recycling, even coming from the UK. It's unheard of that we don't recycle glass, tins, plastic, food waste here automatically. And we are watching, you know, you hear the spring is getting later each year, the rain is getting heavier, the storms are getting more intense, the summer is getting hotter for longer. Albania is one of the most poorly adapted countries in Europe for climate change. The UK is suffering, in particular, storms coming across the Atlantic from much higher temperatures over at the other side of the ocean. This is going to be the thing that affects us all and affects us all differently. So how do we work together? How do we create a common sense of danger and risk when some of the effects might be quite local, I think.
What about social problems? Like, what social problems are going to be the same in like the next few years, not just environmental of what we learned in science through studies?
I mean, I think they're going to be different for our two countries because our societies are at different stages, but your really big social problem coming up is, first of all, the labour force. A lot of the people of working age have left. A 15% reduction in your population over 12 years is a really big drop. So then businesses don't have the labour force and so on. And then the sort of next version of that problem is pensions. And do you have enough labour force to pay people's pensions? Yeah. We've got an issue with the ageing population in the UK. It's not quite the same as your issue. So there is a pressure on pensions. But actually, I think that the issues in the UK are going to be ones around cohesion, trust in the government, trust in the state, actually, which is bigger than the government, and trying to reconfigure the community's relationship with their elite political masters. And I think that's going to need quite a bit of work in my country.
Yeah, and here we are again. One of the most discussed terms in meetings of various organizations is, again, gender equality. In our society, there are different expectations for girls and for boys. What are some ways we can challenge these stereotypes?
You are already challenging them, both of you sat here. There is a big amount of leading by example. So I don't actually know the answer to this. I was at an event which was rewarding really inspirational young people, and most of the young women in fact all of the young women who went up to take their award were wearing very high heels, and high heels in particular for me are designed by men for women to make them look vulnerable and unable to run in the event of a hijack. But of course they might make you look more glamorous or make you feel more comfortable. Now, I'm not going to tell any one person not to wear high heels. I do think that there is a reflection moment for lots of young women, and bear in mind I have 3 teenage girls, about how their outward engagement with the world, their appearance, how much that really matters compared with how much their ideas matter, their argument, their actions. And I think a little bit that's got balanced unhelpfully towards a kind of Instagram visual importance rather than what did I actually do today. So it's a sort of film of you helping the old lady across the road rather than the act of helping an old lady across the road. And I think that's getting that balance right, and schools have got a role for that, influencers have got a role in that, parents. But I mean, as young people yourselves, you can wait for schools and parents and everyone else to do it, or you can do it yourselves. You can be those voices. And you may disagree with what I've said anyway.
No. It's really true. Like, I agree with everything you said, especially the one that of the individual responsibility. It's the most important thing out of all. Yeah.
What do you agree as well? You see, we don't always let the man speak first.
No, I agree too. How can governments, school and organizations work together to provide better opportunities for young people, especially those living in rural areas?
I mean, we've just started...
It's a big dream in rural areas. There's so big dream. So many young people there has a big dream.
Yeah. And some of them has big potential, but just don't have the opportunities.
So they are big dreams in small places. We've just started working with your ACPA, your Agency for Employment and Skills, and IOM, and different municipalities, including Dibër municipality, to essentially help people find jobs with companies that don't need it. So that is government, ACPA, private sector, all of the different businesses involved, government from ours as a sort of donor with IOM, and of course the municipalities, and then the schools who are advertising it. That's one really concrete example. I don't know if it will work. It'll be really interesting if it does work. There's definitely a role for government and for schools in creating opportunities for young people. You've got an activist ministry for youth, you've got the structures around youth agencies, youth council and so on. Those will only ever be as much as the people that comprise them. There's an assumption, this is definitely my personal opinion, but there's an assumption that institutions are things. Institutions are not things, institutions are arrangements of people. And so if you've got people inside those institutions who want to make it work, who are charismatic and meaningful and have new ideas and have big dreams, then you can do a lot with the structures you already have. I don't know if you and your fellow students here feel that you've got those opportunities. Do you know if you can access them? Do you know that you can access them but choose not to because you're too busy or too bored or you don't care? These are the things to work on, right?
Now let's go from the past to the future. When you think about the future, what's the one thing that comes to your mind? Like, what's the one thing you're excited about moving forward?
I'm excited about young people. My girls are going to be part of changing the world, I'm sure. I am excited having had this conversation with you. I am really optimistic that regardless of whether the government does the right thing, that with people like you, you will insist on changing the world.
Yeah.
I think that if you lack confidence as a group, get people to help you with that confidence. So get people to train you in public speaking, in personal impact, in writing a good CV, in debating. Work on your critical thinking skills. How do you read the newspaper or the news on social media in a critical way? How do you make it so that you don't just believe something because you agree with it? Instead, how do you challenge that? I agree with that, so let me just check. Is it well sourced? If you can work on that critical thinking and you can work on public speaking, and there are lots of opportunities for you to do that if you go out and ask, then I think my generation will gracefully step away so that yours can take over. And I think that's the best optimism I have for the future. And you better do it quickly, because I tell you what, with the environment, we're busy messing it up already for you.
And now I think that here it is, the most beautiful question. If you could go back and give advice to your younger self, what would it be?
I think I would tell my younger self that it isn't such a big deal. So I had lots of what at the time I felt were missed opportunities. When I was 17, I got very badly burned, and it meant that I couldn't do a debating competition in Israel. And I thought this was the end of the world, this was the end of my debating career, it was the most exciting thing I ever would have been able to do, and it's fine in the end. I got a grade in a couple of my exams that wasn't the grade I wanted. I thought this was the end of the world, and no one's ever asked about those exams ever since. I went to one of the jobs that I did, and I found it kind of going really wrong. I found myself in that job doing something that I didn't agree with morally. And so I resigned and did a different job. You can take risks, and it's all right if it doesn't turn out perfectly. I am very much a fan of the good enough effort, which just gives you more time to do more interesting things. But my really big piece of advice to myself would be, don't worry, it will be okay.
What a beautiful advice to end this podcast, this episode of this podcast. It was a pleasure to have you here, Mia. Your perspective is insanely interesting, and I think this interview, not only by us, but by the whole audience, was enjoyed. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you too.
Well, I've really enjoyed it. You've taught me a lot already, and I wish you all the luck for the rest of the podcast series.
Thank you.
Thank you.